Hey, good morning to those of you on the West Coast. Good afternoon to those of you here on the East Coast with me. I'm excited to have you join me. I'm actually out near a naval base and a nuclear power plant. And so I don't know if it's today or later on in some of these trainings, but you might catch me with these huge sirens going off in the background. But that's just live TV. So we're live and you get that. Um, I wanted to start off before we hit the main topic today of how to get federal buyers to return your calls. I wanted to start off with one of my favorite books is Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I talk about it a lot because it is such a great book, a foundational kind of skill set, mindset book for me, and one I think you would really value if you haven't read it already. But the first habit in the 7 habits is be proactive. And I just wanted to, say congratulations to you that you're here, you're being proactive. Even if you're watching it on the replay, right? You're being proactive to come in and learn, develop new skills, see what I'm saying from a different angle. You're picking up new tips. If you're an experienced person, if you're newer to the game, you're developing this skill. And everything we do in the federal government contracting space is about skill development. You'll hear me talk about this in a minute, obviously with process, but we're developing skills. And one of the first things is just showing up, and being proactive is showing up, right? You're taking the time to be here. And I want to thank you and congratulate you for being here. And we're going to get rocking and rolling to today's topic of how to get federal buyers to return your calls. So if you don't know me, my name is Neil McDonnell. I'm the president of the GovCon Chamber of Commerce. And I want to welcome you to my daily LinkedIn Live federal sales training, where I provide tips for success in the federal market. I spent 20 years as a small business owner in the federal market. And since 2018, I've been teaching people like you that government contracting is not a secret. It's just a process. When we follow the process, we achieve the goals and the expectations we set for ourselves. Before we get started, do me a favor, help buyers, help me remember who you are by putting your company name and your core competency, 2 or 3 words that describe your core competency, into the chat. And also grow your network as we go along, just by engaging with others in the community here with you. This is your community. These people are your peers to government contracting, the government contracting world. And I'd love for you to connect and, at the very least, create new relationships, if not, teaming relationships down the road. So engage on that. And then another thing that I'd like you to put in the chat as we're going along, because we get buyers who occasionally come in here. If you haven't done this already, do me a favor and throw your, if you're in a small business program that's 8A, HubZone, woman-owned small business, or service disabled veteran-owned small business, do me a favor and put those, one of those 4 programs, or all of them, if you have all 4 of them, put that in the chat. Let people know that, hey, we're a HubZone company. Because sometimes people are looking for HubZone partners, or maybe if the buyers are in here, they're looking to engage with small businesses that are in that space or have those designations because they're thinking about doing set-asides. Okay, finally, I wanted to thank our sustaining members, the GovCon Chamber of Commerce sustaining members. They're the ones who make all this possible, right? Without you, we wouldn't be able to make this possible, and I just want to say thank you. Okay, let me make sure my scrolling captions here is off, and we're going to get rocking and rolling on today's topic of how to get and find buyers. How to get federal buyers, to return your calls. That's today's topic. If you're experiencing that kind of challenge, right? If you feel like they're not calling you back, you're not alone, right? Sometimes they just don't return the call. And most times, 99.999% of the time, it's not about you. It's really not even about them sometimes. It's just about the situation before them and they don't get back to you, right? But I get it. It can be really frustrating if you're not getting callbacks or emails responded to, even though you feel like you're doing the right things, right? People like me and other experts out here, we tell you, hey, you need to be building relationships by reaching out, picking up the phone and calling somebody, sending them an email, but they're not returning your calls. I get that can be frustrating when you get really no traction in there. And that's what we're going to try to address in today's training. In a previous training, I've talked about a 30-day roadmap for reaching elusive buyers in the federal market. It was a step-by-step approach of what do you do over 30 days, to just keep following up. And it was pretty much the answer to what do I do if people don't call me back, and how often should I follow up? And so it was the answer to that. Today is more advanced training on that topic. But if you want a copy of the handout that I created for that, put 30-day roadmap into the chat, and we'll let you know how to get a copy of the roadmap if you don't have it already. But today, again, I want to focus on a more advanced approach to getting federal buyers to return your call, right? And the advanced approach really is about making it all about them, making it all about that buyer you're trying to reach, focusing on one person and trying to reach them, right? Focus on that one person you're trying to reach by making it all about them is the general theme of what I'm going to teach you today. As you move forward, it's just focusing on one person at a time will help you be able to improve your likelihood of getting federal buyers to call you back. In today's training, I'm going to cover 3 approaches that you can take that'll help you get more calls returned from these federal buyers when you're reaching out to them, right? The first thing I'm going to talk about is I'll explore how you can take advantage of knowing a buyer's WIIFM. What's in it for me, right? Understanding how that can help you get them to return your call. The second thing I'm going to share, or I'll share some tips on how you can warm up these leads, these people you're calling, how you can warm them up before calling them or emailing. And the third one, finally, I'm going to wrap up with tips on how you can make them actually come to you. That's one of my favorite things, right? It's one thing to be knocking on their door. It's another to get them to knock on your door, right? So I'm going to wrap up with how you can get them to actually come to you. So if these 3 sound good to you, that's what we're going to talk about today. These 3 approaches I'm going to share, by the way, these are about you taking responsibility for them not calling you back, right? Compared to putting the responsibility on that federal buyer. And when I say take responsibility, I'm not saying take blame, right? I'm saying you're taking control. When you take responsibility, you take control. What these 3 approaches I'm going to talk to you today about, it's going to put you in control of whether the federal buyers are getting back to you. So if you want control, take responsibility. So put I'm responsible as we get started here in the chat, and let me know that you want control of your own success. You're going to take responsibility. I'm responsible in the chat, and I'm going to dive into the first of our 3 discussion topics today. And this one is about knowing the buyer's WIIFM, right? What's in it for me? And so let's talk a little bit about what is WIIFM, right? So WIIFM stands for what's in it for me. And when you think selfishly, I go somewhere, I'm thinking, well, what's in it for me? You know, somebody asked me to go somewhere or do something. What's in it for me? It doesn't always mean it's a selfish thing, but it's an instinctive thing that a lot of us go, well, what's in it for me? Why should I do that? Right. And it doesn't mean I'm doing it because you're paying me money or something. For example, I do this training. You know, one of the biggest things that's in it for me is that I didn't have this training when I was a small business owner, and I really was frustrated. I kept looking for the answers about what do I do? Well, you're telling me what to do. Well, how do I do that? I couldn't find those answers. And so what's in it for me, frankly, is just the joy of knowing how many thousands of small businesses I have helped over the last 5 years. My team and I have helped over the last 5 years by putting these trainings out in various forms, right? This year it's been about video training, but we've been doing this for 5 years. And so that's what's in it for me, is that selfishness is really just a happy face kind of thing, if you will. But sometimes I'll do something because you're paying me $5, right? My kids ask that all the time when it comes to chores. Well, what's in it for me? Well, part of it is a roof over your head. And sometimes it's a what do you, I can't even remember what you pay kids. Like, what's that? Allowance. Because I don't pay my kids allowance, I couldn't remember what it is. But part of it is they do the chore to get the allowance, right? Well, when we're reaching out to buyers, we want to think about what's in it for them. And so maybe changing what's in it for me to what's in it for them, because people don't care about what we know, about what you know, until they know that you care. And taking the time to understand or think about what's in it for them. If I'm reaching out and I'm asking for a meeting, and that's what we're really talking about, right? I'm sending an email, I'm sending a phone call asking about scheduling a meeting, and they're not responding. I'm trying to increase their response rate. Well, am I taking the time to think about what's in it for them? What do they get out of it? I know what I get out of it. I get a chance at a meeting. I can hear about opportunities. Perhaps I can shape an opportunity, win an opportunity. I'm millions of dollars richer in my company, right? Theoretically. But what's in it for that other person? And so taking the time to think about that will show that you care, but also it will, because you care enough to think about them, it'll also increase the likelihood that they'll want to respond back to you. Sometimes you hear people calling this a value proposition, value prop, right? Is, what's the value to the other person? I've done a whole nother training where I talked about, don't ever just think about the other person, always think about yourself as well. So you're focused on win-win relationships where everybody's winning. But sometimes we tend to focus a little bit more on when you're up, it's up to you to get your side. I got mine, you get yours. And a value prop or WIIFM kind of drives into that. It answers kind of that question of why should I meet with you? Or in this case, why should that buyer meet with you? So I wanted to give you a couple of WIIFM examples here that that I think about when I look at a buyer. Just two examples that I might think about that really, and it's about me trying to give them something. So the first one is, say a new policy comes out, new regulation, a new law, a new policy guiding something in the federal government. I could be reaching out to them that says, here's what this policy means to me. Or this is, this policy was 50 or 100 pages, right? Here's the part that really matters to your agency. Here's the part that really matters to your command. Why should a subordinate command down in the Air Force care about this federal law, regulation, policy that just came out, right? Why should we care that there's this new green initiative coming out through the government about making the buildings more efficient, et cetera? I was working with a customer or a company that reached out to us, and they sell, it's really interesting, but they sell lights that actually also clean the air at the same time. So you can put it in the ceiling. And so when I look at that, it's not just about selling the lights when you're talking to somebody. It's about saying how by putting this in place, you're addressing these initiatives, these federal policies that are coming out saying, we need to make the air in our buildings within the federal government cleaner for the employees so that we reduce their negative impact of health issues, et cetera, but also the cost of healthcare and time off, the impact of the mission, et cetera. So that might be something I do is I'm going in saying, hey, can I explain this policy? And going with that, my second example might be a specific one. Actually, let me show it to you. This one is a new zero trust policy that came out. And I love it because I'm going to actually share something about this. So I think I got this right. Hopefully I'm sharing it correctly, but this thing just came out a couple of weeks ago, and it's the new Department of Defense Zero Trust Strategy. And if you don't know what Zero Trust is, basically it's cybersecurity. And so it's this new strategic document and roadmap, but it's a document designed for the government. And so if I'm a cyber company, I want to look at this one and begin to tell my customers, hey, what's going on? And so if I want to come down here for a second. If I come in, I might sit there and say something like, look, I want to come in and talk to you about the new Zero Trust strategy that DoD put out and where they're providing guidance on what to do, right? And I'd like to tell you the top 5 things that I found in this document that I think will be important to you. So it's something like that, right? Where I can take a document that's 37 pages, and this thing's gold mine, by the way. Speaking of my kids getting allowances, one of my sons is actually going to go through and snip things out of here so that I can share it as a carousel. But images like this, right? These pillars, I could share this with somebody I'm trying to have a meeting with, and I can say, hey, I'd like to talk to you about our interpretation of the DoD Zero Trust pillars and how they impact you and maybe what you should be thinking about in 2023. And by doing that, what I'm basically doing is saying, hey, I want to give you something of value coming in. I'm thinking about what's in it for you. What's in it for you is that I'm going to come in 30 minutes, tell you how you can really take this document and begin to be compliant with it or learn from it, right? The DoD guidance might be a learning exercise if Department of Education is looking at that document. So there's these ways you can go back and forth, but the point is taking some new information that's coming out from the government and sharing this. So a couple of last points on this WIIFM part of it, right, is that you want to get the buyers to help the buyers understand why they should care by telling them. Sometimes you have to tell them why they should care. If I just go in, I can't assume that they're going to know what I'm talking about. So if I go in and say, hey, DoD just dropped this new Zero Trust strategy document, well, who cares? Like sometimes they don't even know that they should care about that. And so I've got to make sure I'm guiding them to tell them about it. And this goes to my last topic, which is really going to be maybe a head turner for you, is that WIIFM's got to be communicated in 4 to 15 seconds. And here's why. Because today's training is about how do you get them to respond back? How do I get them to return my calls and my emails? Well, that means your emails, you have to communicate the WIIFM in 4 seconds. No one's going to really want to read a long email. So if you can get that, what's in it for me, what's that value proposition of meeting with you in 4 seconds in writing, that'll come across. And the 15 seconds, you can use that for a voicemail. So a voicemail is 30 seconds long or less. And, you shave off 15 seconds for the intro and the outro. And the meat is 15 seconds. So you got to communicate, hey, I'd like to talk to you about this, right? Anyway, so coming back to how do you get them to return your call? One way is to make sure that you know the buyer's WIIFM and help them understand that. If you're following with what I'm saying, if it makes sense to you, put know their WIIFM in the chat, right? Know their WIIFM, WIIFM. Put that in the chat. Let me know that you know that you're tracking on what's in it for them. And I'm going to head on into the second topic I want to cover today about how you can get federal buyers to return your call. And in this way, it's just about warming up leads before calling or emailing them, right? So if I call somebody and I haven't done anything to warm it up, that is purely a cold call. Cold calls are bad, but the likelihood of people returning my cold calls are far less than if I have warmed up those leads one way or another. And I'll give you a couple of ways before calling them, before emailing them. So the first and very best way to warm up a lead before you ever call them is by getting an introduction. If you can get John to introduce you to Jane and they know each other, right? Then that's perfect, because now you're borrowing the trust that Jane has for John. Jane's thinking, well, if John likes you and trusts you and is referring you, then I'm going to like you and trust you and talk to you at a certain level, right? She's going to still be a little bit new to the relationship with you, but she's going to trust that John would never send her somebody who's no good, right? Or whatever. And so that's a good introduction. In the federal space, there's specific roles that you really want to be tracking for introductions. So an example of a role that you want to be tracking on is the small business professionals, right? Small business professionals have various different titles. One example is in an agency, they're called small business specialists, small business deputy in the Navy. They're called different titles, but the small business specialist is that small business professional throughout the agency. And they're a fantastic gatekeeper, and gatekeeper not in a bad way, but just they help you get prepared to go farther into an agency. Of course, sometimes you're going to run into small business professionals that are just not worth their time. And that's fine, because sometimes they run into small businesses who are just not worth their time, right? So that's just the way life is. But for the most part, small business professionals are really good assets to you. And when you can get in there and talk to them, give them a little understanding of what you do and tell them who you want to meet, they can make that introduction. Now it's a warm introduction. Another example of a small business professional, two other examples, are both employees of the Small Business Administration, the SBA. One is the PCR, the Procurement Center Representatives. These people basically do oversight on the agencies to make sure they're going small business set aside when they can in a high level. And so they work with contracting officers and small business specialists. I mentioned this the other day. I'll say it again, that one of my customers reached out to a PCR, and I think within a week that PCR got back and said, hey, here's a list of all the people I work with. And this was in North Carolina, right? So here's all the small business professionals I work with. And you have this ability to kind of move forward. So PCR is excellent source of an introduction. You want to build relationships with these people. So when you ask for a referral, you get it. And the last one is business opportunity specialists at the SBA. These people's, one of their main responsibilities is to help guide the 8A program participants through the 9 years of their program. But they help these people have success. And one of the ways they help is by making introductions. These BOSS or business opportunity specialists professionals, they're there for all of us, though, all of us small businesses. And so perhaps you can develop a relationship with them. They also work with agencies. They tend to have stronger relationships with ones that are in their geographic region or something, but they know enough of them. I want to blow through a bunch of these other ones really fast because I got a whole nother slide. But another example is PTACs, right? Make sure you talk to your PTACs and have a relationship. I call them one of the 7 mentors out there, but PTACs are great folks for getting to know and getting introductions to agencies in that geographic region where the PTAC counselor is, where you live, right? That's generally your PTAC. You have one PTAC for you. But if you want to go across the country and meet somebody in another agency, another state in an agency there, well, then what you do is you find that agency, you find the PTAC, find a counselor there, come back to your counselor and say, hey, do you know this PTAC counselor? And could they introduce me somewhere else? If you can get this series of introductions, it makes it so much easier than if you just cold called, especially if that person you're cold calling is not responding. Another example is local organizations. There's all sorts of them around the country, AFCEA chapters. One of my favorite is Catalyst Center. Lee Christensen down in Huntsville, Alabama, knows like everybody down there. And so if you were trying to get an introduction, you might build a relationship with her and get in. By the way, a little quick caveat, sidebar here is that if you're not making money, if you're making like less than $1 million, don't try to get into an agency. Just flat out, that's what I'm saying. Go get into small businesses and build relationships and start building your company that way. When I talk about getting into an agency and talking to the buyer tends to want to talk with those of us who are at a little higher level, we've done $1 million, $2 million, whatever in business. Could you get in there if you haven't done that? Yes, but that's just it's not the most successful way for you. The most successful way to make money, ending my sidebar, when you're getting started, the most successful way is subcontracting under small businesses. So let's say 40 million and below, right? Leave the larges and leave the primes out until you're making $1 million or $2 million. Quick sidebar. Last one is LinkedIn connections, right? If I want to connect with Janie at an agency, I can look at Janie's profile on LinkedIn and see that I can reach her by calling Paula, and Paula knows Janie. And so I can reach out on LinkedIn and ask for a connection or an introduction to her connection. One quick tip is that I might reach out to Paula and say, hey, Paula, would you make the introduction? If you're willing to do that, could you just send her this message? And I have like 2 or 3 lines, and the lines basically are a cut and paste that Paula could do into a direct messaging in LinkedIn that goes to Janie, right? So making that introduction. But LinkedIn connections, anytime you want to meet somebody, you can see who you're connected to. What would it take to get to them? So a couple other ways that are in here. I'm not going to talk about it because I want to move to the last bullet, but engage on LinkedIn, follow these people on LinkedIn. I have a whole nother training on it. But when you engage with them on LinkedIn, you're going to be able to warm them up. And if you're having a hard time reaching this person, they're not on LinkedIn, engage on LinkedIn with their peers at their office. Engage on YouTube. No one does this, right? NavVac, for example, or NavC or somebody, they have a YouTube channel and somebody's in there putting content on. And sometimes you get agency buyers in there putting a post and I see no comments and a couple of likes or something, hardly any views. It's because in the federal space, people aren't in there as much. Get in there. It's a way to kind of get engaged. And if you just follow their channel, you might be able to get traction in there. And the last one is follow on internet. When you're on the internet, look for somebody, say somebody you're trying to reach. They might have this unofficial presence on the internet. Hey, what I say is my words only. I don't speak for the Army kind of thing, right? But if you find them, oftentimes they're still talking about their government job. They're just saying, I'm not speaking on it from the government's perspective. I'm not speaking for the government. I'm speaking for me. But it's a way to get to know. So this is all about warming up leads before calling or emailing. So if you're following what I'm saying, you understand the value of doing that, put in the chat, warm up leads into the chat. So I know that you're following, warm up leads. And that means we want to warm up leads before we make calls. Okay, so the last tip I want to give you as we roll through here is make the buyers come to you. These federal buyers who you're trying to get them to return your call, well, actually just make them to come to you or attract them to come to you, right? And so one of the easiest ways that I mentioned this yesterday, and I was thinking about it, but it's so much easier to have a meeting with somebody when they're knocking on your door and all you have to do is open it. But if you have to knock on all the doors, it's much harder. Think about it as Halloween, right? If you go around and, excuse me, not Halloween, but meeting your neighbors. So if you try to go around your neighborhood and knock on all the doors to meet your neighbors, they might not even be there. It might take you forever to meet your neighbors and you're walking around constantly. But if you wait until Halloween and you wait till Halloween to meet your neighbors, you put out some decorations and make sure your house is known for handing out big candy bars, not the teeny little ones, right? Your neighbors are going to come to you. All the kids will be dragging their parents, etc. And each year, these parents and these families and these kids will be telling all the new people in the neighborhood, hey, make sure you go to Neil's house. He hands out the big candy bars. He's a nice guy or something, right? Well, that's a way to meet the neighbors, but it's what I want you to have in the federal space. You could do something similar where you're getting the buyers to come to you. And pretty soon the buyers are telling their friends, hey, have you come over here? Have you seen what they're doing over here on Zero Trust or what they're talking about here on the right painting for walls or something? And so here's a couple of ideas on how to get them to come to you. I really want to focus on program office, but briefly, I'll tell you to reach contracting officers and small business professionals, the biggest tip on how do you make them come to you is to be visible when the buyers go looking, right? If you've watched any of my training, I talk constantly about visibility. It's the very first phase of our 90-day workshop is visibility. What's the point of doing all this other stuff in the workshop if you're not visible, right? And so a couple of examples of visibility where you want to be visible. Dynamic small business search, #1 market research tool for the federal buyer. If they go in, make sure they can find you. And that just means putting in a narrative, putting in some keywords, and basically you've hit the bulk of what you need to do. HHS, as an agency example, they have a supplier portal. Be in there. That's the first place they're going to look, even before DSBS, because they've set it up themselves as kind of a quasi DSBS within their agency. And so they encourage buyers to come look. And the small business office hosts that or makes that available to the internal buyers within HHS. So be in a supplier portal. Another couple of things to keep in mind are matchmaking events or vendor outreach sessions. Attend every single vendor outreach session that is at your target agency. If you want to get into DHS, don't register once for DHS. Commit to attending every single vendor outreach session that they have. It's a short amount of time commitment for you, but those people who organize it, it's a big deal to them. And they will begin to see you month after month, year after year or something. And when they get information from these vendor outreach sessions, they tend to put it somewhere where other people within the agency, DHS, for example, can get access to it. So you want to be able to make that available for them. Okay, so those are some examples of visibility for the contracting officer and the small business professional. The next one is how can you reach program office? And so here, I want to talk about just one tip. I could talk about 1,000 things. In fact, yesterday I talked about 5 or 6 different ways of doing things, but today I want to talk about creating value add webinars, right? You could also do podcasts and you can do other things, but that's not what I want to focus on today in my last 4 minutes. So value add webinars, what these are is they're bringing value to your customer. They're not a sales pitch or anything else. They truly are bringing value add. So I mentioned earlier that zero trust strategy. Well, I could do a webinar on that topic. I could pull out, hey, here's the top 10 things you should be aware of in this zero trust strategy and why it's important and maybe one step you could take. I'm not asking for anything. At the beginning, I'll say, hey, I'm Neil. At the end, I'll say, hey, if you'd like to work with us, call me. But that's all I say from a salesy way. And that's not really salesy at all. But in the middle, I'm giving them just pure value. You want it to be 30 to 60 minutes. And it can be just slides, right? You can go into PowerPoint slides. If I did one on zero trust, I might snip out pages straight from the zero trust strategy and just point to it with a couple of arrows and then talk to it. And if I'm an expert in that space, it won't be hard for me to talk about it and give the government buyer advice. So slides are just fine. You can do it live, like these are live that I do, and then their replays are available, or you can just record it until you feel good about it and then put it out. Most of us don't care because only so many of us can see something live. And for the most part, we come back and watch the replay. And this is really important on the replay. Make sure that it's not gated, right? When you're doing something, you can gate, like you can have let's say a 60-minute webinar, and you can gate that with just an email. Never ask for more than that because it really is putting too much friction between you and your buyer. And that's another topic. But you do want to have several 60-second, let's say, little videos on that same topic. You could drop them here on LinkedIn. Your buyers are here on LinkedIn. If you started dropping a little video related to a bigger webinar that you did, even if you just snipped part of it out, and you can find anybody online to teach you how to do this, as you go forward, you can start driving people to your topic, and they begin to see you as a trusted advisor, a subject matter expert. They start coming to you. And this is what I mean by make them come to you by seeing you as the expert, right? By the way, I am going to be releasing a course on creating webinars, the thing I just talked about. I'll create it for free for our sustaining members. So just for members, watch out for that. But you can do this yourself, right? You can get out there on the internet and quickly find out, how do I create a webinar? It's pretty straightforward. It basically is a PowerPoint deck doing a briefing, right? And if you do that and you make sure it's just having value of what you're talking about, your customers will appreciate it and they'll come knocking on your door at Halloween and after watching the webinar. So if you understand the value of attracting buyers, put attract buyers into the chat. It's not just about pursuing them, but it's kind of about getting them to pursue you. So attract buyers in the chat. Let me know you're tracking on that. And okay, so just a reminder, the 3 things we talked about today: know your buyers WIIFM, warm up your leads before calling and emailing them, and then make them come to you. Here's my one tip for you. Before the end of the day, just think of a topic. Don't do the whole webinar, but just think of a whole webinar topic that you could give in January. If you just think that today, you've at least written down a topic title. Later on, you can figure out how do I break it down and do the bullets. Hey, if you'd like to work with me and my team, we have a BD Accelerator workshop. We'd love to have you join us if your company's in the right space. To learn more, do me a favor, just direct message me here on LinkedIn. And remember, government contracting is not a secret. It's just a process. I'll see you in the next training.